You're listening to the Rise to Thrive podcast with your hosts, Linda Tate and Amelia Travis. Rise to Thrive is your life resource for manifestation, wellness, and abundance. Tune in weekly so you can thrive daily. This week's episode coming at you.
It's 2019 and your investments can be in alignment with the world you are creating. Change Finance is not your normal Wall Street company. They are woman-owned and offer investments that change the world. Go to change-finance.net/MBTY to learn more and start investing today. Change Finance is a registered investment advisor. This is not an offer to buy or sell any product.
What's up, Rise to Thrivers? Welcome back to another exciting episode of your favorite podcast with your hosts, Amelia Travis and Linda Tate. We're coming at you today with a super exciting topic, giving you permission to explore more in your life, in your relationships, and in all the things that your curiosity leads you to. Linda, welcome back.
Thanks, Amelia. Great to be here.
It sure is. So today we're talking about permission to explore. Are there areas of your life right now which feel rigid, or where you feel like you're stuck in a rut, or you've been doing the same thing over and over in the same way for years, and you're inwardly craving a big shift, a change, the desire to break the mold, but you feel like you're not even sure how to do that? Linda, do you feel this way?
The first thing that comes to mind is I was in almost a 3-year bullshit, I don't like to work out. And I, from my background in college athletics, always had this pressure to be working out at this high level. And I noticed I lost the curiosity around physical movement. And I was tired. I literally was saying to a friend, I hate working out. And I was like, oh my God, who am I? What did I just say? Mm-hmm. And I'm had this moment where I'm so blessed. I'm in this physical body that's pretty awesomely functioning. And I'm going to be I hate working out. And I brought that curiosity back and have lately been checking out Legree Pilates on the Megaformer, which I've told you about, and I can't stop gushing about, but it's an ass kicker. And every time getting this soreness into my soul, it feels but reconnecting into my body, in such a really cool way in 50 minutes. So that's been my most recent rut and exit from.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just going to go for the jugular and say that as new parents, ours has been sex. If you're married, any of my listeners who are married or who have been in a long-term relationship for a long time, especially you can even have a great sex life. You can know what's good and what works. And it kind of can come into this pattern where it's just okay, we know we want to do this because we know we want to get to the end result, but let's just get there. And so you do this and then I do this and then you do this and then we go this way and then boom, 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 and then we're done. Right. And it's that's awesome. But there's also something super exciting and delicious and amazing that can happen when you give yourselves permission to explore outside of the normal way of doing things. So in this situation, for me, my husband had back surgery back in December, and really the 6 months prior to that, things had been super, super, super limited in this department just because physically not able to do any strenuous physical activity. So you guys can use your imaginations, right? So, but when it was time that he's healed and he's able to work out again and he's kind of all clear to let's go again, it felt like an exciting opportunity to kind of mix things up a little bit. And so maybe just initiating that in a different place than normal, or a different room or a different time of day. For me, it's I'm not going to generalize and say all men, but my husband would love it if we had sex every single morning. That would be amazing. I, on the other hand, would love to sleep every single morning, right? But I decided permission to explore what happens if I just tell myself hey, I'm going to wake up, I'm going to roll over, I'm going to wake him up very nicely in the most ideal way that he would like to be woken up. And it's been really incredible. Actually, I found that the days that I choose to initiate sex as the first thing that happens in the morning before our son wakes up is like, I have so much energy. I'm like so positive that day. Like I'm on top of the world. And so I'm like, wow, you know, this like permission to explore outside of my normal expectations for like, even when I want sex or when I want to, you know, initiate is like benefiting me. And I think that that is like, you know, kind of the core of what I want to talk about today in this concept of permission to explore is like, could doing things, exploring different ways of doing things from how you're used to doing them open you up to blessings and benefits that you weren't even necessarily aware of.
This is true when you're talking about sex. Like, I've noticed if you have the preconceived notion of like how things are going to go down, and like you're saying, it's like boom, 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 this works, this works, this works, this works, done. Versus like it might even literally be exactly the same, but you're just like in every part of it, like in it. Like, I know we talk about presence, but like truly presence, how it feels like so much different every time.
Mhm.
And that's been like the magic stick.
No pun intended. Yeah, so for me, that is tuning into pleasure, but before pleasure is presence. So like you just said, it's like actually becoming hyper aware in that moment of like the sensation that you're experiencing, even if that's a non-sexual sensation. Like bonus points if you decide to extend or expand your experience of foreplay to even like be first verbal and then maybe non-sexual touch. So like let's get into like, and this can be solo or with a couple, but like let's get into like an extended 20 to 30 minutes of like non-sexual touch. So whether you're massaging your own body or your partner's body without going near the no-go regions, so like, you know, breasts and genitalia for women and the nether regions for men, but like just touch everywhere else, and like with a lens of super curiosity about how things feel and tuning into what's unexpectedly pleasurable. So maybe like the insides of the elbows, the backs of the knees, like places that you would never normally think like, oh, that's such an erotic zone, but it is. So yeah, I mean, I think that this willingness to explore, it extends beyond just the things that we've talked about so far, your workouts and your sex life, but it also, you know, giving yourself permission to explore can be hugely beneficial in all your relationships, in your nourishment and the food that you eat, the activities that you pursue, your spirituality and your spiritual relationship, giving yourself permission to explore there. Like we said, sex, careers. I mean, you can apply this, Linda, I think, to pretty much every aspect of your life.
Yeah, and when we were first talking about this, you know, the root of this was spirituality and like the rigidness that can come up in religion. And as you pull back the onion layer and you're like, oh yeah, curiosity and spirituality, and then it's like, yeah, this goes for everything. Like, you try on the curiosity hat, you're gonna find some information wins for yourself.
Yeah, and I think talking about curiosity as a driver of exploration is pretty cool and important. You know, I was reading something that says that it's the universal human experience includes questions about our purpose and the driving desire to know who we are, and that the inspiration to explore, which is also known as curiosity, is part of our DNA. It's part of our intelligence, really. And that's because the instinct to explore becomes the instinct for inquiry, right? Which is the foundation of enlightenment. So inquiry meaning asking questions about yourself, your experience, the world around you. That's the foundation of science, but it's also the foundation of philosophy, right? So like from our curiosity comes all different forms of illumination on ourselves and on everything around us. So what about when people find it hard to explore? Like, what does that look like? Because I would say, I think in most areas of my life, I'm pretty well. I'm pretty willing to explore in most areas of my life, except for maybe like food. Like
Bring it on. Give me the weird shit.
no, I'm the girl who's like, if I've ordered something at a restaurant one time before and I know it's good, I'm probably going to order it for the next 400 times because like, God forbid I like order the wrong thing and then I don't like my food and then you have the food that I want and then I'm mad at you because I want to eat your food.
I'm the girl at the table that's like sales pitching every single person to order something different so I can try everything.
You're kind of the queen of curious exploration.
I'm like, all right. So and I'm like picking, I'm like, oh, I think she'd like this one and he'd like this one, and then they'd get this one, and then I'd have everything I wanted to try just so I could try it all. And it's funny you say that because I also would get teased, like, you know, in the number of different hobbies, like, oh, there's Linda with another new hobby. And it's like, I look back and I'm always learning, growing, and like very curious. And it never felt like I had new hobbies, like a new hobby of the week. I just like want to learn and grow and try something new, like sup yoga.
Yeah, so I think when people have resistance to trying new and different things, especially like what you're saying is like people were trying to shame you about having new, like the desire for new and different experiences with frequency. And I think that comes from our culture, that we have this value in our culture of like specialization that I think sometimes gets carried away. So like, for example, I mean, we ask children as young as 3, 4, 5 years old, what do you want to be when you grow up? You know, like we talk about that with my son, Tanner. He's 2.5. Like he'll tell you that he is a firefighter. Like, that's cool. It's also cool if he changes his mind on that, like next week or 100 times before he grows up. And it's funny because looking back, like, so I'm a Libra. And if you guys follow astrology at all, like the stereotypical Libra, is like indecisive, right? Has trouble making decisions. I think it's because we're like equal opportunity lovers. Like we can see how all the different things could be really cool. And so why would you want to only explore one when you could explore like all 100 of them? But that's not necessarily what we reward or what we educate people into growing up. We kind of tell people like, hey, you know, you have to pick this one sport or hobby. You have to pick your favorite subject. You have to pick, you know, what you want to be when you grow up, and then you harness and focus all of your energy toward that thing. And I think that's cool. But there's this analogy from Liz Gilbert, who I love. If you guys aren't familiar, she wrote Eat, Pray, Love and Big Magic. And she says that there's two kinds of people. There's the hummingbirds and there's the jackhammers. And the jackhammers are like, they know yeah, they've always known what they wanted to do, and they just like hammer away at it with dedication and focus their whole life and like singular focus, right? And in a sense, like I can see that. Like my sister knew she wanted to be a rocket scientist or an aerospace engineer from the time she was like 8 years old, right? And I, on the flip side of that, wanted to be an oncologist and then an epidemiologist and then a body language expert and then an attorney and then a singer and then like I could tell you like 100 million different things, a psychologist, all these different things that I wanted to be growing up. And so that's the hummingbird, right? The hummingbird is floating from one idea to another. It's cross-pollinating ideas from different areas to others, and it's not saying that one is better than the other. It's like the jackhammer is going to get shit done and like with efficiency and like hammer away at the task, but like the hummingbird is going to get to see and experience so much more. And you know, I feel like really happy to be a hummingbird.
Do you want to go deep or wide?
Well, that's the thing. Like I feel like there's almost shame around wanting to go wide. And that's like my whole life. That's been my whole life. That's why, you guys, I'm 33 years old and I'm just finishing a 17-year bachelor's degree because I changed my major 6 times and I went wide with like 12 different universities, and I went wide with becoming a yoga teacher and then this other yoga certification and then managing an art gallery. And then, you know, what is like, when we flip it on like the positive side, we say like, oh, well, she's a Renaissance woman and she wanted to live 1,000 different lives within this life, and she's multi-passionate, is the way that I put it. But then the flip side of that, if people want to look at it in a negative light, is like, flaky, non-committal, like indecisive, don't know what you want, like not focused, scattered. And the funny thing is, I hear people use these negative descriptors to talk about themselves, when what I actually see in many of them is this deep desire for exploration. And whether it's society or their parents or institutions that have told them like, this isn't okay, you have to pick one thing and specialize and focus and do that for 40 years and like, become an expert. It's like, yeah, maybe that's one way of doing it. But there's also like so much value in seeing the world, in trying different forms of relationships, in trying all the different dishes at the restaurant, right? Like,
well, couldn't it be said too that like, whether you're going deep or wide, that you've been doing both? And what I mean by that, and a friend put it this way today, she said, we're talking about like growth and evolution in certain areas, and it's like when you hit the next level in one, you almost discard everything else you learned. But when you look at like the collective kind of upgrading and understanding and experience, they all were intertwined, and something that could feel so unrelated to a totally different area actually helped you grow in that area in ways you would have never understood.
Yeah, and I think that's the lens that we're often, maybe not even often, I think we have that available to us in hindsight. So I can look and see now how, even though I've been told over the last 7 years that I'm too multi-passionate, that I have too many different revenue streams in my business, that I'm trying to do too many different things, and that, I can't be interested in yoga and fitness and surfing and stand-up paddleboarding and spirituality and business and merge those all together into something cohesive that works. What I have found over the years is that is actually completely false, and that like I have learned from each of those different areas of passion. And now it's like this beautiful like jambalaya of, my interests, that what I'm able to do from my experience is teach other people how they can be successful as multi-passionate entrepreneurs, and how weaving together all of these different strands over time is really what's creating this totally unique, cohesive brand experience that people are only going to have with them because they're bringing it all with them, instead of feeling like they have to narrow it down. So I kind of think that there's we need to lose the idea that there's, always only X number of options, and maybe start to open ourselves up to the idea that there's literally like this quantum reality of a myriad of experiences, like infinite number of experiences that are unfolding before us in real time. And like, I see it in my mind as like all of these threads, like quantum level threads, right? Like they go out in literally every different direction, and we can choose to pick and follow any of those threads. And yet at the same time, like we could decide to switch and like weave it into a different part of the story if we want to go a different way.
And
so
it's all connected. Like in that process, is it all connected? And you always being on the edge of your inspiration, right? Which is like the most life-giving experience that you could have.
Yeah, well, that's funny that you say that, because one of the things that I wrote here in my notes is like, don't play it safe, play the edges. And so this idea of playing the edges is something that I feel like I've done for most of my life, and not always in a healthy way, right? Like when I was younger, it was playing the edges of safety with like hardcore drugs, you know what I mean? But that was really because of my desire to play the edges of consciousness, but an immature expression of that desire. You know what I mean? It's like, rather than going to, a sweat lodge or a plant medicine or a meditative experience or, a spiritual experience through kirtan or repetitive chanting. It was like, let me see how much acid I can do, and like, you know, see where that experience takes me. Play the edges later, you know, in relationships during those sugar baby years was like, I want to date, you know, as many different kinds of people as possible, not even just men. Like I want to just see what it's all about, you know, men, women, different styles of people, different races, everything. And it was like playing the edges of what's available and possible. I think food is like the only the only area where I've always been kind of like a play it safe kind of girl. Like
next time we go to eat,
25 years to eat to try hot sauce. Yeah, it was like Brett tried to get me to eat Cholula for like 4 years. And when we started dating, I was like, I don't like that stuff. And finally he just like started putting it on my food without asking me. And I was like, oh, this is good. It has a little kick to it. And he's like, yeah, that's hot sauce. That's what you've been refusing to eat for like 5 years. So don't ask me while like I'll play Russian roulette with my life. But when it comes to my tacos,
don't you touch it.
So what about you, Linda? Do you feel like you've primarily played it safe in life, or have you played the edges, or does it depend on what aspect of your life we're talking about?
I mean, I can relate to my edge playing at certain points in time, not have been being the healthiest. So that would have been from the ages of, I'd say 15 to 25 was definitely more of like a, like invisible, like I felt invisible, or like if I drank under the influence, drove under the influence, like that would be fine. And, you know, it's like not the best type of risk taking.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere along the way, I realized like a different experience. And that's when I think I really started to explore my curiosities in healthier ways. And whether that's through my quote unquote hobbies, and it started with movement and a lot of different like personal development, whether mindset, psychology, health. I mean, I have my culinary education, as you know, but it, like just really feeling like the tingles and going with it. And so I'd say it's been the full spectrum. And when I have something like a deep, deep yearning that keeps coming up and I go for it, I've never 100% never been disappointed. And that gives me, I think there's a lot of like trust in that, because it's definitely not maybe the most practical or the most, you don't even know how it's going to be possible. I mean, when I was going to go to cooking school, I'm living in Florida and now I'm going to be going to school in New York. Like I have a house, I have a payment, like all these things. And from the moment I made the decision, literally every single detail, like clockwork, down to my car getting totaled so I didn't have a car in New York, it happened. And like there's the element of like the magic involved in exploring your curiosities. So when I hear people talking about their curiosities or just trying something new, I get the biggest smile on ever, because it's like, you know, something amazing is about to happen in their life, and like to see that.
So I want to like go a little bit deeper in that, because I think for some people, even the recognition of their curiosity could feel challenging, right? Like and I think for both you and I, we've had a few years, a little bit of practice here to start exploring curiosity, and especially as entrepreneurs, that's something, you know, and as what I would call like consciousness explorers through yoga, meditation, mindfulness, all the different ways that we explore that. I think we've had a little bit of practice, but for some people, I think recognizing, you call them the tingles, like can even be a challenge. So, what would you say is like a good way to start to tune into your own curiosity, which will lead you then to your passions?
Yeah, I mean, for me, part of the experience was to even create that space. So the way that that happened was through meditation, and is meditation. But if I were to rewind and think to like those years where I'm just in the grind, right? Like wake up at 6, like get a workout in, get to work at by 8, work all day, get home at 7, eat dinner, go to bed, start drinking Friday night, you know, it's the weekend, have some downtime. Like I didn't have much space to truly connect with me on a deeper level in that time. So I think to rewind, it's like, if you're not feeling those spiritual tingles, it's like, how much space are you giving yourself for that to even come up? And to even just start with, could just literally be like sitting on the couch alone without a cell phone, without anything else going on to distract you, to literally be with yourself, forget it even being meditation. And the more that you can start tuning in, the more that can come through. And I also believe that when your body and mind are like clean and pure, that it's going to come through, whatever it is going to come through easier. And so whether that's a clean diet, I mean, I'm primarily plant-based, and my energy, my quality of thought, it's tremendously more intuitive and quality. The thoughts that you're putting into your head, or just even being aware of the type of music you're listening to, the type of conversations, in yoga, and you're learning about like what's sattvic, what's pure. It's like, I'm not talking about this in like a brainwashing, like you have to be perfect or you're bad, but it's just like elevating the quality of the different things you're putting into your body, thoughts, nourishment, relationships, and it allows the intuition to be much stronger.
Yeah. And I would say if that even feels like, gosh, maybe that feels like challenging or whatever, one thing that I would say is like, tune into your jealousy. Like, if you find yourself looking at somebody else's life and going like, oh, good for her, or like, well, that's great, wish I could do that, like change that, back up a little bit, tweak it, and say, wow, I wish I could do that. And then how, like, wow, what if I could do that?
That's
And
huge.
like every time I see someone doing something that I'm jealous of, now I just ask myself, why not me? Like, why not me? Why am I going to sit here and be jealous of her or him or them when I could just instead ask, what would it take for me to do that? Right?
How did they do that?
How did they do that? Yeah. And then knowing that, like, how cool it is that they could do that, right? So when I say tune into jealousy, I mean, start to notice, like, especially if there's patterns, if you find yourself consistently feeling, finding the green-eyed monster when you look at other people's yoga travel pictures on Instagram, like, maybe you should sign yourself up for a retreat. Maybe you should, maybe you want to just take up practicing yoga in your own home and then like create on your vision board like a plan to travel somewhere in a year and have that experience. If you're feeling jealous of someone who, you constantly see making art, like, this is one example that, I shared with you, Linda, before this call, but I used to think that artists were so cool. And I totally had this, like, especially like the girls who seemed like, they could make really cool collages, and they would like make their own clothes, and you'd go into their house and they had like their own paintings on the wall. And I was like, oh, they're so cool. And I had this story where I was like, I'm not artistic and I can't make art. And I'm not sure why that is, because looking back, I was always, I think, always a pretty creative person, but somewhere between late elementary school and high school, I started comparing myself to other people who perhaps had more of a natural inclination towards drawing or painting, and just was comparing my art, my artistic production to theirs, and then decided that that wasn't good enough. But around 24, I would say around 24, I had never really tried to create art, but I had this spiritual experience that kind of set me on the path of like, I'm going to become the woman that I'm supposed to be. I want to learn to surf, I want to write more, I want to paint, I want to practice more yoga. And it was like, at that time, I just decided, okay, one of those things was I want to paint. So I went to Michael's and I bought some canvases and I bought some paints, and I went home and smoked a joint, and I sat down and I painted a painting. And it's funny because I'm looking behind me right now and I can see the actual first painting that I ever painted. It was a painting of my dog that hangs in my office now today. And I remember distinctly having the experience of like doing a couple of these paintings and not knowing anything about how to paint, I'm putting that in quotes, or like the right way to do it or technique or anything, but producing art. And it was art that I liked. And I was like, huh, how about that? took me 24 years to realize that like I can paint. And so for me, it was, I'm pretty sure it was like tingles of a little bit of jealousy that kind of led to that. And likewise with being a yoga teacher, like before I became a yoga teacher, I remember being in Las Vegas when I was during my sugar baby years, and somebody would ask me what I do and I would lie to them. Like I lied to these people and I don't even know where it came from. I was just like, I'm a yoga teacher. And then I realized like, wow, no, I'm not, first of all. And secondly, like that must be something that I think is cool. Like I think there's something admirable there, or I wouldn't just pull that out of my ass and say that to a stranger, like when it's a complete fabrication. And it was so interesting because whether that was like, you know, foresight and me knowing on an intuitive level that that was part of my future, or whether I was just a freaking liar and like was like thought that that was cool, like it that little sense of like jealousy or desire or whatever you want to call it was actually the seed that then later blossomed into something really beautiful. So even if creating intentional space, you know, quiet time or cleaning up your act with, you know, food and all that, if that feels like you just want to flip us the bird through the airwaves, like, okay, cool. Tune into like what makes you feel a little snarky, and like maybe you should do that yourself instead of just looking at other people, you know?
The art story, my dearest friend growing up, she was a really gifted and still is like beautiful artist. And I was like a straight A elementary school student and like kind of sporty. But it was always that I was getting straight A's, like straight A's through sixth grade. And that I was like the math brain and that she was the artist. And just felt so much shame around even the idea that I could do art. And also came into like loving to paint later on and still have all my acrylics and it just being so fun. And it's like interesting because there was a story that I'm the math brain that I bought into. And this idea of the jealousy being so much information and guidance, like this I just learned within the past year, and understanding that there's desire, if you could even sub jealousy, sub in desire, like how much freedom and how much better that feels.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, especially with social media, it's like I'd look at something and I'd be like getting upset and it's like jealousy. But you make me laugh because that's how I got into swimming. My mom was like, Rock, to my brother, you know, your friend Ryan is joining the swim team. Do you want to? And I'm in the other room and I'm like, Mom, how come he gets to swim and I don't? Like this competition, like jealousy that, you know, a decade later you're in college swimming on a scholarship. And I'm laughing like that was some of the first of the exploration of the curiosity, but because of like a spike of jealousy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I think you touched on something really important, which is just jealousy is just one of the shadow faces of desire. And so you can decide, like, do you let it remain jealousy? Where jealousy, I think to me indicates that you like begrudge the other person having it, right? Where like we can flip that script and it can just become desire in that you desire to have it. If you can then also celebrate that this other person was able to like prompt that impulse in you, awesome. But even if you don't get to that level of evolution, this is what I'm saying, is like you can still take that as your impetus to explore and to like go check out something different.
Have you heard of the concept of like expanders?
No. Is this a human design thing?
No, but it's like, you know, instead of like the person that you got jealous of, they would serve as an expander to you. So this is some of the work Lacey Phillips teaches. And it's like, you know, just showing you what's possible. And
Yes.
It's exactly that. It's like your creativity, your curiosity, and showing like someone else was able to do it, so you can too. And can you like invite, even if it's not the person, but the concept of the person into your like inner circle of expanders to just keep you moving forward to what your heart's desiring.
Yes.
And that's powerful.
Yes, 100%. Like, I think that that is one of my biggest pivots like in life in general is just getting to where I recognize other people's successes as an indicator of what's possible instead of a reflection of what I haven't done yet, you know?
Yeah. And like being
Um,
like down and pouty and like, meh.
yeah. Yeah. I think too that, you know, it's important to, when you're recognizing something in somebody else, that you desire to trust in your own ability to evolve and to know that like you feel the pull to that because that call is on your life. And this is something that I think is really important because if you ignore that, if you ignore those tingles of curiosity, if you ignore that little bit of jealousy, if you ignore, then you're out of alignment. Then you're living a little bit of a lie because you're negating part of yourself. You're not owning the fullness of yourself. And this is where this like gets really important in all the different aspects of your life, especially when it comes to things that are more taboo, like sex and spirituality. If there are things that are calling to you, even if they're maybe unconventional, do you know what I mean? Like if you're really curious about consensual safe BDSM, like maybe you need to go there a little bit, you know what I mean? Like if you watched 50 Shades of Grey and it colored you all sorts of
Shades.
gray, yeah, you know, maybe you need to like have a conversation with a consenting partner, or maybe that's something that you want to like expand and explore on your own. And likewise with spirituality, I mean, I think we're so indoctrinated into believing that spirituality can only exist within institutions. I think that's a common, like that spirituality exists within religious institutions specifically, is I think a lot of the way that people are raised. And there's so much importance, I believe, in foundational wellness to finding your own spiritual agency and autonomy. And what I mean by that is like coming to the recognition that we all have, that we are all spiritual creatures, and that we all have a hotline to something that's bigger than ourselves. And that literally there are however many, 7 billion, 8 billion, there's a lot of people on this planet. And every single one has a unique expression of the hotline, right? So even if you share a set of religious beliefs with other people, nevertheless, your individual spiritual experience is going to be entirely different from any of those other people, because you're experiencing it. Yeah, you're experiencing it through your own lens of sensation, perception, through your own hotline, through your own experiences. And I think that
It's like a snowflake or a thumbprint.
totally.
None are the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah. And I think this celebration, like beyond being okay not fitting in and getting to where like you're really excited about not fitting in, that is like such a cool place to get to. And here's the thing, we all want to fit in. Belonging is a foundational desire because it's related to survival. Like from the tribal, you know, communal living perspective, like if you don't have belonging, like you're gonna get kicked out of the cave and like you're gonna die, like you're gonna starve to death, right? But in the landscape that we're living in today, you know, it's a little bit of a different, like that need for belonging is still super important, but it becomes confining and like limiting when you allow conformity to strip you of like the sparkle of yourself that is going to like lead to so much magic and gifting in your life. So I think, you know, for every single person this is going to be different, but like whether it's relationships, food, activities, spirituality, sex, your career, like where are you feeling rigid? Where are you feeling trapped? And where are you feeling really curious, maybe about stuff that you've never even acknowledged before?
Yeah,
And like,
there's an idea too, like if you are identifying what the rigid areas are, to consider what would be the exact opposite of that expression. And if that feels too extreme, like explore the in between of the opposite.
so can
And
you give us an example?
Yeah, I was having a conversation today. Honestly, it's like a systems thinking concept. So where this came from is like if something's not working, so it could be something in business or a way that you normally do something. I was thinking of it more in systems. So if you're saying like capitalism, the way we see it today isn't working, could you consider what the exact opposite would be? And then could you find somewhere in between that actually feels good? So if I was doing CrossFit every day and that's feeling rigid and I hate it, the opposite could be yoga. And I have curiosity around yoga. So I go to yoga every day for a month and I'm like, that doesn't feel right either. Maybe the solution is like a mixed blend of both or trying something totally new. Why I use this as an example of the opposite is to get to contrast where there usually is some information for you.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that example packed enough punch.
Yeah, I think it's good. I mean, I was thinking about like, well, what would a more extreme example be? And it would be like, okay, you hate your job, you feel really rigid in your job, quit your job, sell everything you own and move into a van. But like you see people doing this.
No, and like that's a great example because it's not to actually take the action, it's to consider what the opposite is. So it's like quit my job, live in the van, sell everything. And it's like, that might have been too extreme. What's the in between? Maybe like me and my partner buy a van and for a month a year we go on a van road trip, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden my job feels a lot better. So there's like solutions in the in between, and this idea is to help those that can't even identify like where the magic or curiosity is, just to start thinking about what like the opposites of the things that they're feeling burnout in would be.
Yeah. Yeah. So we hope that that is giving you guys some stimulation for your curiosity and that you will take that into your life. And one thing that I wanted to share is that it's recently been debunked in neurogenesis and neuroplasticity. These have both debunked the idea that the capacity for change, that the physical, like mental capacity for change is fixed. So what this means is your brain is constantly forming new connections. We don't stop learning. You can teach an old dog new tricks. So get excited about that. Yeah, get excited about that and about the possibility that like just because life has looked a certain way and you've been in a certain pattern for 50 years or 60 years, that doesn't mean that can't shift and change. And I'll share with you, my mother recently attended her first yoga retreat with me at 66 years old. She's been practicing yoga now for the last 5 or 6 years. And she came on this retreat, and when everybody was going around and sharing what their intentions were, she said, my intention is to uncover where I have room to grow. And I was like, oh, that's really beautiful, and she said, I'm surrounded by people who are in their late 60s and early 70s who it seems as though they have decided now that they're only operating in this space of entropy, that they're only closing down, shutting off, letting go, that they're getting ready for the end, and she's like, and I just feel like there's just so much room to grow still. And I want to uncover all of the spaces in myself where I can continue to grow. And I was like, that's freaking awesome, Mom, because how cool to recognize that at any, and she's 66 now, and my grandmother lived to be 92. So like she could very well have a solid 30 years ahead of her of growth, and how unfortunate it would be to decide like when one has 30 years left, like, well, I guess this is it then. Not gonna like learn anything new.
30 years is some people's lifetime. I mean, she's expressing like in real life, if you're not growing, you're dying.
Exactly. So we'll leave you guys with that. If you're not growing, you're dying. And I take us to the book club.
This week's book club is called Tune In. Let Your Intuition Guide You to Fulfillment in Flow by Sonia Choquette. And this book, I was at a crossroads and I went to the spiritual bookstore and I felt drawn to this book, and I was wanting to explore my intuition more. And in this book, she just gives some simple tools and techniques to be able to explore your own intuition, whether sitting with yourself or writing. and offers some different prompts and like Q&A that could inspire a different way of thinking, some breathing exercises. And if you want to tap into your curiosities, I highly recommend the book Tune In.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm tuning in right now to that book. All right, guys. We hope this is giving you more inspiration and excitement and permission to explore in your own life.
And remember, freaks fly together.
Let your freak flag fly today, this week. Let us know what takeaways you have from this episode. If you like it, please subscribe, leave a review, share it with a friend, spread the love so we can all rise to thrive.
Ow, ow! Tune in weekly to thrive daily.